Like a right doing this, but here we go.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for commenting on my dancing already. That's much appreciated. It's so lovely to see you all here today. Thank you for taking the time and for already lighting up that chat feature. It's so wicked every week to see all of you. So thank you all so much for being here today. I am absolutely buzzing on many levels, whether it's excited to see you all in the chat feature. We've got Gretchen in Kansas, USA, all the way through to Sharon in Swindon. And the fact that we've got Eddie with us here today as well, who by this point is just an absolute friend. It's going to be a great session. So thank you all so much for being here today. Two challenges for you as ever. The first challenge is to keep that chat feature buzzing as it is right now. I love seeing Jane saying hey from Spain. We've got Lawrence from Holland, Georgie from Norfolk, Maria from Kenya. It's just awesome. This lights my heart on fire, and thank you all so much for being here. With your chat feature, just make sure to switch your messages to everyone so everyone can see your messages, not just Eddie and I. The way you do that, click into the chat feature, you can see two, and presently if it's only on hosts and panelists, then that'll be only Eddie and I. You need to switch that to everyone so everyone can see your messages. The second challenge is I would love to see your biggest takeaway from today's session on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, wherever it may be. I know that Eddie's come here to deliver a great session, and I'd love to see afterwards the thing that you took away. That would be awesome. So if that sounds good and you're up for those two challenges, and I'd love a hell yeah in the chat, then we should continue into, yes, Kelsey, thank you very much. Then let's get going with the introduction of today's guest, who is Eddie Shleyner of Very Good Copy, although I think it should be called very good copy, because he's really good at it. A Very Good Copy is an incredible resource for anyone wanting to become a better writer. And this is actually Eddie's second time speaking at the Marketing Meetup. In that time, he's gone from someone I admire for their work as a sensational person who's taken the time to master their craft. And over those sort of 4 months in between the first session and this one, then he's just turned into a friend. He is someone who I admire as one of the world's greatest copywriters, but also someone who's kind, considerate, and just a top chap. I'm absolutely buzzing to have him involved. As you can see, it's really nice. Today we'll feature a presentation and then a Q&A, so you can get your notebooks out and relax for the first little bit, and then we'll have time for Q&A. So the thing in the Q&A session that you need to be doing is head into the Q&A feature, which is found down below, and ask any questions that you would like to throughout the duration of today's session. Those of you who attend on the regular will have heard me say this 100 times by now, but usually it is the first questions that get asked that are the ones that gravitate towards the top using the thumbs up feature. So do take the time to get your questions in nice and early, and then also give a thumbs up to any questions that you really want answering, so that we take the time to answer them for you. I've got one last thing to do before I pass over to Eddie, which is to thank today's sponsors. And every week we have a featured sponsor, and this week it's Brand Recruitment. Brand Recruitment were one of the first sponsors to ever come into the Marketing Meetup, and throughout the past 5 years have been phenomenal sponsors of the Meetup, and partners and friends, and have helped us deliver these sessions to all of you. I've got one ask, which is that you take the time to thank Brand Recruitment. They are recruiters who give recruitment a good name. They're genuinely good human beings, and they want to help you find a job. The key person at Brand Recruitment is a man called Dominic. If you could say thank you to Dominic, that goes a long way to continuing their support for the Marketing Meetup. Likewise, I want to say a big thank you to our other sponsors, each of which will be featured on rotation. So we've got Geosk, Impression, Content Cow, Fiverr, Redgate Software, Cambridge Marketing College, Gravity Global, and Third Light. As I say, I'll speak about each of those on rotation as the weeks go by, should you choose to come back to each of our sessions. So That is my introduction done. So I just need to hand over to my friend and the very, very accomplished Eddie. It's over to you, my friend.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right.
He's gone for
That's
the. Got it. Yeah, got you. He's gone for the square slides. I love it.
Okay. Well, first of all, that was incredibly generous, Joe. So I don't know if I can really live up to that, but I'll try. And I want to thank you for having me on, man. You've built an amazing thing here in the marketing meetup, an amazing community. And you've set a great example for so many people who aspire to build a community of their own, including myself. So I'm honored to join you again and hopefully bring some value to all the folks who are with us today.
Thank you, mate. And there's a lot of people here commenting already saying what a magnificent mustache. So you're getting a lot of love already.
I appreciate it. Well, hey everybody, thanks for joining. Like Joe said, my name is Eddie Shleyner. I'm a copywriter and a content marketer, and the founder of VeryGoodCopy.com, which is where I publish content about copywriting and marketing and creativity. To date, I've created almost, say, 400 articles and interviews, as well as courses and series and presentations like this one, which all live live on or inside Very Good Copy. I was also the lead copywriter at G2.com for a few years, and before that, I was in-house at another tech company, and before that, I was writing copy at an agency. So, throughout my career, my work has always demanded, ideation and creative thinking. And frankly, for a long time, that was really terrifying to me. Like in the beginning of my career, I think I really romanticized the idea of being a copywriter and working in a creative capacity every day. But I was working scared, honestly, and kind of white knuckling it, just like in a constant state of adrenaline, because I didn't really know, I think how creativity worked. Looking back, I don't think my lifestyle or my habits, my mindset in general was, making it easy for me to think creatively. And that made the work really difficult for a while. And it made me kind of question my abilities, and it made me question myself. And, ultimately it was, creating a lot of anxiety. So, when Joe invited me and we decided creativity and ideation was going to be the topic, I went ahead and collated 9 pieces of wisdom. So these are quotes or sayings or lessons I've come into that have over the years either, changed my perspective or my ethos, or given me confidence, or in some way helped me do better creative work, in a healthier way, a more enjoyable way. And that's really important because, creativity should be fun, and it should be rewarding, and it should bring you joy. And that's my hope, is that, something you learn here today will bring you joy by way of creative clarity or confidence. Because if you can be clear in your thinking, and confident in your decision-making, you will find yourself having more consistently good, or I guess I should say viable ideas. And before we jump in, I want to note that most of what I'm about to share is based on broader creative principles. So, I'll be sharing a few techniques that will help you do creative work. But for the most part, these are principles designed to help you think creatively in all aspects of your work and life. Okay. One more thing. I have a cold, so if my voice sounds raspy or if it cracks at any point, I apologize in advance. Also, if you hear a baby crying, that's Bo. He's sorry too. Okay. Now let's jump in. And I wanted to start with a concept that when I heard it, not only did it change the way I worked, but it really changed the way I saw everything, right? It was actually a really transformational piece of wisdom that I've carried with me through just about every job, every project, every article I've ever really written. So it really did change my life. And like most profound things, it's very simple. It's a quote from an old school direct response copywriter named Eugene Schwartz, who's actually thought to be one of the better copywriters of the 20th century, just based on his sales promotions, just based on how much they brought in. And he was giving a seminar once, explaining his methodology and his thought process when being creative. And that's when he said this. He said, a better word for creativity is connectivity. And it was such a light bulb moment for me, because up until that point, creativity was such an abstract concept for me. Like, I understood fundamentally that, creativity was the act of making something, but how, right? Like, where do I start? What are the steps? How do you go from nothing to something? And it turns out you don't really need to start from nothing. In fact, it's almost impossible to make something out of nothing. In that same seminar, Schwartz said, you can't take nothing and make anything. You're not God, right? Instead, what you are doing when you are being creative is trying to connect two separate ideas that logically would not go together up until that moment. So really, creativity is the act of taking old things and putting them together in new ways. And if you're a copywriter or a creative director or someone responsible for bringing ideas to the table, this is really comforting. At least it was for me. Like, I found great solace knowing that, my job is not to make something out of nothing. My job is to take two things that already exist that may not normally go together and put them together in a way that makes sense, a way that tells a story or stirs emotion, a way that people will remember, basically. And in the context of marketing, one of the best examples of this connectivity concept are Super Bowl commercials. If you go back through history, and you'll see that some of the best, most iconic, most popular Super Bowl spots are really just connecting disparate things. So, for example, let's see. Here's one from last year.
Cheetos have popcorn now?
Hey, I'm gonna need you to. Never mind.
Can't touch this.
Help.
You can't touch this. You can't touch this. You can't touch this.
I trust you.
Stop. Time.
I touched it. New Cheetos popcorn. It's a Cheetos thing.
Okay, so basically, this is the product of a copywriter and an art director making two things that don't normally go together, right? Cheetos and MC Hammer come together in an elegant way. And that's what makes it so creative, the fact that it's combining two very different things in a seamless and compelling way. Okay.
Cheetos.
Here's another one. I think this one was from a couple years ago.
Come out, wherever you are. Got new Mountain Dew Zero Sugar with the same refreshing taste as the original, but without any of the sugar. Here's Mountain Dew Zero.
I am thirsty.
So again, this commercial is the result of, combining Mountain Dew with The Shining, which already exists in pop culture. So the creative team behind the spot isn't starting from scratch, right? And yet the final product is pretty fresh and new. And
Come out.
now here's an example from all the way back in 1984.
Today we celebrate the first glorious anniversary of the information purification. It's time in all history, a garden of pure ideology, where each one may secure from the pests of a country. Is more powerful a weapon than its needs, or are the other? We are one man, one will, one resolve, one Our hands shall talk themselves together, and we will find. We shall reign.
On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. And you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
Okay, so I'm sure everybody, has seen that spot or at least heard of it. It's considered one of the best commercials, not just Super Bowl commercials, but commercials, period, of all time. And it's the product of connection, right? Not invention. It's the product of taking an existing story or concept and connecting it to a product, or a unique selling proposition. And you can do the same thing in your business. And to help you do that, I want to show you an exercise that's always helped me. Basically create two columns, in column A and column B. And in column A, write the name of your company or your product or service or your feature, whatever it is you're trying to sell. And in column B, write 50 random things. And could be nouns, could be people, could be allegories, fairy tales, could be shows, movies, anything really. And if you can't think of 50 things, go to randomwordgenerator.com and it will instantly give you 50 things. So no excuse. And then get several people in a room together and go down the list and try to connect these random things to whatever it is you're selling. Try to create a story or a narrative where both of these things exist, just like those commercials did. That is a tried and true mechanism you can use to get this process started. And it's not going to do the work for you, but it is going to give you a starting point, and it's going to get people talking and ideas flowing. And usually that's the hardest part. Okay, moving on. So a few weeks ago, I was watching a great documentary about a band called Sparks. It's on Netflix. I've never actually heard of them until I watched the movie, but apparently they were an enormous influence on the entire music industry, and they broke a lot of new ground as far as techniques. The techniques they were using, the stories they were telling, ultimately the type of music they were creating. And the band is two brothers, Ron and Russell Meal. And it's been 5 decades, and they're still making music, and they're still relevant. I think they just did an album with Franz Ferdinand not too long ago. So they're doing something right. But anyway, in the documentary, Russell Meal said something that resonated with me. He said, I think in the beginning, I was trying to be as much like Mick Jagger or Roger Daltrey as I could possibly be. And I kind of missed the mark by a few thousand miles, but something else emerged. And it's such a perfect way to express one of the key elements of creativity, which is emulation, right? It's copying people. Basically, we learn by copying because when it comes to craft, we can't really introduce anything new until we've learned the fundamentals. And that's why all artists spend their formative years producing derivative work. So, the Beatles started off as a cover band. Edward Hopper, learned to paint by replicating other paintings. Hunter Thompson transcribed the Great Gatsby just to see what it was like to type a great novel. And obviously, Sparks, despite how innovative they eventually became, started off emulating the artists they admired. So the takeaway here, I think, is that being creative doesn't necessarily mean you have to be original. You can copy and emulate and imitate, your creative heroes, and it's still beneficial to you as an artist, because invariably over time, you will start making adjustments to their work that align with your unique tastes, and your preferences. And the more you do this, the more adjustments and changes you make, the less recognizable those influences will become, until eventually the work is going to be your own, and then people will see it as your own, and then people eventually will start imitating you. Okay. So I heard a contemporary designer named Mike Monteiro say something once, and it's never really left me. And I talk about it with people all the time, especially folks who are stuck in their creative process. Specifically people who don't know what to write about next or what to create next because they feel like they don't have anything to offer. And here it is. He said, the secret to being good at anything is to approach it like a curious idiot rather than a know-it-all genius. So in other words, if you look at this quote through a creative lens, the message is don't put so much pressure on yourself to be an expert. When I started Very Good Copy, I was not an expert at anything. I didn't know anything about copywriting, anything about persuasion, about newsletters or, social media or growth marketing or anything that I now teach people. I started Very Good Copy as a way to teach myself things, really. And VGC was my way of documenting my education. And through that process, I killed two birds. I taught myself copywriting and marketing, and I built an audience comprised of people who essentially were learning alongside, with me, especially in the beginning. So now, had I told myself that, I wasn't qualified to teach marketing because, I didn't know marketing. I don't know if I would be here right now. I'm here because I said I'm going to be, curious and study and document my education, and and share it with whoever's interested. So I wasn't, an expert who had his own ideas necessarily. I was just like a curious idiot, who committed himself to packaging and distributing other people's ideas in my own unique way. And I think really that's what made the difference. Okay. Hey, by the way, is this thing in the way, Joe?
What thing? The No, you're all good, man. You're all good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My bad. Just making sure. Okay, so I love John Cleese. I think he's a lot of fun. He's an actor, but he's also a writer. And he authored a book about creativity, and it's called Creativity. Really short, really good book. And there are a ton of great lessons in it. But one specifically has helped me a lot, especially with Very Good Copy. He says, we don't know where we get our ideas from. What we do know is that we do not get them from our laptops. So in other words, having real world physical experience is excellent fodder. And having this in the back of my mind has been really invaluable. As I was writing and ideating for VGC articles, specifically because, so many of them are framed in a personal story, something that happened to me while I was out in the world living my life. And I take these stories and anecdotes and happenings, and I do my best to connect them or weave them into a lesson about copywriting or marketing or creativity. And this is something every one of us can do. If you want to deliver a message, one of the best ways to make it stick is to frame it in a personal story, a story that happens out there away from your computer screen. And if you do this, what you'll notice is that other people will see their lives in your stories. And that's because by and large, we're all the same, right? We're all sharing the human condition. So even though your experiences are personal to you, they may still be universal, and that's incredibly powerful. So when Cleese says step away from your laptop to get ideas, he's really just saying, go feel something in the real world, go make a connection with someone, and then bring that feeling back to your work. And chances are people will empathize. Okay. So Charles Bukowski is one of my favorite writers for many reasons, but in part because his creative journey is so inspirational. He worked at the post office until he was in his 50s, and he worked there all day, and then he would go home and write poems at night. And he did this for decades, writing poems and sending them off to publishers. This was year after year, but he didn't really make any significant progress. I think he had some sporadic success, but he could never really break out in a way that allowed him to, quit the post office and write for a living full time. And then one day he met a publisher named John Martin. And this Martin guy found his work and became obsessed with it and was convinced that, Bukowski was the next Whitman. And so he made him a deal. He told Bukowski that if he quit his job at the post office to work full-time as an author, he would, 1, publish anything he wrote, and 2, pay him $100 a month for the rest of his life, whether he was writing good stuff or not, whether he was successful or not commercially. And apparently back then it was the 70s, so $100 was enough for Bukowski. So they agreed. And Bukowski began writing his first book. And the story goes, he finished it in 3 weeks because he was so anxious to get something out there and see the response. So he gave himself 3 weeks to finish it, and he did. And it's a perfect example, I think, of Parkinson's law, which states that work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. So in other words, if you give yourself a year to write a book, it will take you a year to write it. But if you give yourself 3 weeks to write a book, it'll take you 3 weeks. And the same law applies to, smaller scale projects. If you give yourself 8 hours to write an email, it'll take you 8 hours. But if you give yourself 2 hours, you'll finish in 2 hours. And I think that's because by putting a hard deadline on creative work, you won't have time to, second guess your decisions and doubt your ideas. In other words, you won't have time to complicate things. And that's really the secret. That's why Parkinson's law is the law. Like, time is a luxury that basically gives you permission to complicate things. And when you take that luxury away, suddenly you're forced to start making decisions and committing to ideas. Okay. Another story about Eugene Schwartz, the copywriter. He got hired to create an ad for a product. I don't know what it was, but it doesn't really matter. Point is, he met the client at a bar, and they ordered a few drinks, and the client loosened up and started talking about his company and his product and his market for hours. And all the while, Schwartz was there with pen and paper, taking notes. And when there was a lull in the conversation, he would just ask another question, and the client would start up again. And that night after the bar, Schwartz went home and wrote the ad. And according to him, 70% of the ad was in the client's own words. Even the headline was something that the client said verbatim. And when the ad ran, it was a winner. And the client was happy, and Schwartz earned a great commission check. And the lesson here, in Schwartz's own words, is that you don't need to have great ideas if you can hear great ideas. And this is especially true in copywriting and marketing. Some of the best ideas and even turns of phrase will come from clients and stakeholders and customers. So your job is less about invention and more about recognition and assembly. You have to be able to recognize a good angle when you hear one, and you have to be able to assemble it into a story using all of the copywriting elements at your disposal. So for example, a headline is an element, subheads, images, image captions, body copy, CTAs. These are all elements you can use to help assemble a narrative based on information and ideas somebody else gives you. Okay. This next one is something I picked up independently over time, and it's been really invaluable, at least to me. And it's probably one of the simplest things I do as a writer, but also one of the most important. You really got to record your ideas as they come to you. And again, it seems so simple, but it's almost like not advice. It's like common sense or something. Like, you have an idea, you write it down. You have another idea, you write it down. But I've learned the hard way that it's not that easy. Like, recording your ideas as they come to you is something you have to really train yourself to do. And it has to be like an automatic response, and you have to be draconian about it for it to work. Because it's really easy to, I think, every now and then just be like, oh, I'll just remember that, you know, or write that down later. But if you do that, you really underestimate the way memory works. You know, like we forget our lives almost as quickly as we live them. And that's really dangerous when you live off your ideas, because you never know which idea is going to be a breakthrough. And inevitably you will forget. And if you don't completely forget it, it might morph into, you know, something else, something not as good. So I've really committed myself to pulling out my phone and writing my ideas the moment they come to me. And that's all the time. So I could be in the shower, or I could be watching a show, or in my sleep. I've literally woken up to write things down. And sometimes it leads to nothing, and sometimes it leads to some of my best work. And another benefit, I think, of constantly and immediately recording is that you create a well of ideas to pull from. Like I literally have a folder called The Well in my Google Drive, and it's got hundreds and hundreds of ideas and notes and kernels I can use to start an article. And if you don't already have something similar, I really recommend it. You know, just create a folder in Google Drive, and inside that folder, only format documents a specific way, so that when you see them, you can instantly start writing, and you don't need to put the pieces together in your mind again. So obviously the format is going to be different, you know, for everybody. But for example, the way I do it, I write a headline and then I populate 3 bullets with additional context. So I'll open a new doc, I'll write a headline or basically the main idea of the article. And then 1 bullet will be, you know, the lesson I'm trying to teach. Another bullet will be the story or the anecdote I'm connecting it to. And then the 3rd bullet might be, you know, more context or a link to something similar for inspiration. And this way, even if I come back to this idea months after recording it, you know, I have enough information to, like I said, hit the ground running instead of trying to recreate the idea in my head. So yeah, that technique has been pretty invaluable to me. And I think without it, I wouldn't be nearly as productive as I have been. Okay, so my favorite show by far is Mad Men. And I love it not only because, you know, the main characters are copywriters and, you know, it takes place in an ad agency. I really love it because at its core, it's a show about, you know, the human condition, and advertising is really just the vessel for a lot of the storylines. But anyway, I bring it up because there's an excellent scene early on in the series. I'm pretty sure it's season 1, when Don Draper, who's the creative director at the agency, is helping one of the junior copywriters named Peggy brainstorm a campaign. And his advice to her is, Peggy, just think about it deeply and then forget it, and an idea will jump up in your face. And the first time I heard this, I didn't really get it. I didn't understand, you know, the mechanism. It was very confusing to me why this would work. But when I became a student in copywriting, I realized Draper was explaining the concept of incubation, which is absolutely real and absolutely works. Incubation is when your brain subconsciously makes new connections, and then these connections randomly bubble up to your conscious mind. So some people call their best connections light bulb moments, you know, when you just kind of have a fantastic idea out of nowhere, kind of like an epiphany. And usually this happens after you take in a lot of information, you know, after you do a lot of research, reading, learning about a specific topic or market or product. And then, you know, you allow yourself the space to not actively think about all the knowledge you just acquired. And the operative word there is actively, because even if you're not consciously thinking about all that information, your brain is still processing it in the background, you know, like making sense of everything you just learned and making connections at the same time. And that's why people say their best ideas come to them in the shower, you know, when their mind is elsewhere, on a walk or during a movie, or in the morning when you wake up and you're feeling refreshed and creative. That's the miracle of incubation. You know, that's the miracle of your mind processing and making connections in the background. The only problem is that, you know, it couldn't be kind of hard to find that time to incubate when, for example, you're under a deadline or something, like you can't always have the luxury of stepping away from your work to do nothing. And the way I've dealt with this problem is by working on several things at once. So for example, instead of working on one article all day, I'll bounce between 3 articles. So I'll spend an hour working on each and just alternate my attention. And by doing so, I'm actually still working on 3 articles. I'm working on one consciously, and I'm working on the other 2 subconsciously. And this way, when I come back to an article, I feel like I have a new lease on it. I feel like I'm looking at it with fresh eyes. So it doesn't always make sense to jump around. Sometimes it's good to, be as focused as possible and have like this kind of deep work or flow state. But other times, if you're getting stuck a lot, or if you're hitting a wall, or if you feel like you can't really make decisions, try bouncing between projects and giving yourself an opportunity to incubate while you work. Okay. So in Chicago, there's a famous comedy troupe called Second City, and it's produced hundreds of household names. So Chris Farley, Steve Carell, Bob Odenkirk, Amy Sedaris, Bill Murray, Tina Fey. That's just a handful of the folks who were trained and performed at Second City. And I used to live right up the street, so I started going, and I was taking a lot of writing classes, but I was also taking improv classes. And one of the things I learned is that one of the core tenets of improv is yes and. And what does that mean? It means, if your improv partner says something to you, don't shut her down, right? Don't say no, but, and then go in a different direction. You have to embrace whatever your partner sends your way and then add to it. Because you should be fostering a sense of cooperation and unity, really, rather than shutting down suggestions. Because as soon as you shut someone down, you've kind of lost that momentum, you've lost that moment. And if you don't have the moment, if you don't have the scenario, the story in an improv show, you really have nothing. You're just kind of, up there. So in other words, yes and is the protocol that allows for anything to happen. And that's true for improv performers, but it's also true for anybody doing any form of creative expression. Whether you're on stage or you're doodling a picture or you're writing a story, the more receptive you are to bouncing around, to trying different things, to rolling with the punches, to embracing uncertainty in general, the more likely it is you'll come up with fresh, unique, compelling ideas. And that's really counterintuitive to most people. Most people naturally want to be selective and maintain as much control as possible because it feels safer and it feels more predictable. Like not knowing what's coming next, in almost any circumstance, but especially when you have to produce ideas is really scary. But it turns out not knowing is a great, foundation for creativity, which is why you should say yes and on stage as an improv performer. And it's why you should say yes and in life, I think, as a creative person as well. Okay, folks, that's all I got, I guess. Thank you very much.
Dude, smashed it. Thank you so much, Eddie. There was a quote early on in the chat. Someone said, Eddie seems shy. And actually, you know what? It's not that. It's just, you don't need to speak loudly sometimes when you got gold like that. So thank you, mate. Unbelievable. There was a lovely quote there from the famous Dave Harland, who is sat in the chat as well.
Hey.
This session is like a little science fan getting to listen to Albert Einstein.
Dave's too nice to me, man. He's always so nice. Dave.
I don't think he is. I think you're right. So thank you, mate. Some really, really lovely comments coming through in the chat right now. So thank you to everyone popping in those those comments. It's so lovely to see it's been received really great as well. Do pop in the Q&A. I can see that there's 18 open questions right now already. So folks, if you give a thumbs up to the questions that you want answering, then we'll make sure to answer them first, and then we'll work through the list. But Eddie, thank you, mate. Unbelievable. Let's head into the Q&A. I think there's a lot of questions here that aren't just about what you necessarily presented on, but also just your experience here as well. I think there's a lot of people who have come in knowing who you are and sort of asked for your experience. So hopefully that's okay with you. The first question comes from Poppy. So Poppy asks, are there any key questions you always ask a client around a copywriting brief, beyond the what/when, and more about sort of revealing something that they might not have thought to include in a brief?
Well, first of all, I'm looking through the comments. I really appreciate all you guys. You guys are very nice. I don't know if I deserve it, but I appreciate you all the same. And as for questions that I ask during a brief, or that I wouldn't include in a brief, really, you just want to get the conversation going. You just want to get the client talking, or the stakeholder talking. So just like that piece I said about Eugene Schwartz, how he sat down with the client at a bar, and they were having drinks, and the client was just talkative, I guess a loquacious guy, and just kept on going. I think as long as you're asking open-ended questions, things that you can't answer with a yes or no question, you really can't go wrong, because you never know where there's going to be an angle. You never know when there's going to be some turn of phrase, that you're going to be able to draw inspiration from. I really don't want to ask questions that I necessarily know the answer to, or can, kind of predict what the answer is going to be. You want there to be a broad kind of range for the answers, because again, you just never know what's going to spark an angle or an idea. So
that's great. Thank you, mate. And I guess that speaks to curiosity, right? And you and I were speaking before we went live on the chat today. Do you feel like creativity is intrinsically linked to that curiosity, or is that something completely different? Maybe I'm linking together two concepts here that don't deserve to be. I don't know, but
no, hell yeah. I mean, I'm my latest obsession is Leonardo da Vinci. I was telling you, I was reading the Walter Isaacson book, his biography, and one of the things he discusses in there is how past biographers of da Vinci always said that he was, he had this God-given talent, that he was a genius, unlike any other man, because he was born with it. But really, Isaacson makes the argument that he built himself into this genius. He wasn't like an Einstein that just had like incredible computing power. He was just an extremely curious person who wanted to know everything about the world. He wanted to know, what a woodpecker's tongue looked like for whatever reason. He wanted to know really fundamental things that, you and I probably haven't thought about, since we're little kids. He wanted to know why the sky was blue. He wanted to know how water made its way to the top of a mountain. He would ask himself all sorts of questions, and then he would pen his theories in his notebooks. He had like 7,200 pages of notes at his death that survived to this day, and that's how he wrote the book, just by studying those pages. But the point is, he was curious about so many things, and he got a lot of flack. Critics always said, like, if he wasn't thinking about all of these other things, he would produce so much more work. He would produce so many more paintings, and that might be true, but he wouldn't have produced the Mona Lisa. He wouldn't have been Leonardo da Vinci, because all of those other elements of his personality, all the things that he was curious about, informed that work. And so really, I mean, that is the, according to Isaacson, that's the secret to genius, is being able to connect all of these disparate things from across disciplines. So really, it all goes back to connection. You know, like Schwartz said, it's not creativity, it's connectivity. The more things you can connect in seamless ways, the more brilliant you will be perceived.
I love that. Oh my God. So good. Thank you, mate. That was just lovely. Thank you. Folks, there's a lot of questions coming into the chat feature. So don't forget to pop them into the Q&A, because that's where I'm reading from, and that's where folks can give a thumbs up to the ones you want answering. We probably won't get through them all, so it's important to use that thumbs up feature so we get the ones that you want answered to the top. So the next one comes from Kelsey, and Kelsey is now Marketing Meetup famous, the first recipient of our grant. And Kelsey says, do you have any advice on when to recognize you're burning out and that's affecting your creativity? Have you got any advice on how to reset?
Right. Well, burnout is a phenomenon that will affect probably everybody at some point, not just creative people or creative pros, but anybody that's doing work is probably going to burn out from time to time. And the symptoms are really simple and exactly what you think they might be. It's just you start losing your enthusiasm for whatever it is you once loved to do. And this happens to me quite often. I'll just be like, you know what, I sit down and I try to write. That happens on a daily basis, but sometimes it just doesn't come out. I really just can't do it. Either I'm physically tired or like I really just can't make any connections in my brain. So it's a really, like I said, the symptoms are really typical. You just lose enthusiasm, lose focus for the things that you're really good at. And the best thing you can do is step away. The best thing you can do is, really occupy your mind with something else. That seems to always, refill my tank.
Nice. I love that. And it seems like, as you said in the presentation, it seems like an important part of the creative process, is actually to step away as well, so there's probably a thought there about, if you're not allowing yourself to step away, then you're not giving yourself, it might be leading to that opportunity for burnout to sort of exist in the first instance as well. So I think it's important. And I remember Jeremy Waite said something similar from IBM when he came and spoke about storytelling, and he said, just give times to step outside and look at the clouds, and it feels important. So
right. Yeah, step out, let your mind wander a little bit. Because I think I touched on this in the presentation, like your brain is always working in the background. Mm-hmm. You're constantly putting things together subconsciously, and sometimes if you can't do it consciously, that just means you're tired, or whatever is going on in your life isn't allowing you to do that. So let your brain do it for you in the background. And sometimes that could take a couple hours, and sometimes that could take days, and sometimes that can take weeks. But I guess it all depends on how burnt out you are, how tired you are. Hopefully it's not one of those situations where you just you lose interest for it completely, which I think is a risk. If you push yourself really, really hard and you're burnt out and you just keep on like pounding yourself, it could be that you just lose enthusiasm for that discipline altogether. But I think that would take a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that from Angie, who says, I call that parking it, and I like that a lot. We've got 24 open questions and 9 minutes, Eddie. So I'm gonna try and get through as many as possible.
I'm gonna try not to ramble.
No, mate, you are absolutely fine. You are You're spitting gold. So thank you. So we've got Kat. Kat asks, how do you manage your copy getting watered down from having too many stakeholders or sign-off points? Because presumably a lot of people exist, and you would have existed in this space too, where there's a lot of cooks. How do you avoid that sort of, or even deal with that situation?
Well, I guess it's different for everybody depending on how bureaucratic your organization is. But the best thing to do is just to keep your circle really tight, from the get-go. There's a lot of tactical things you can do from not, letting too many people into the Google Doc, or not letting too many people into the meeting, or, but it's hard to answer that question without being inside of the organization. But I know that, when I'm working with creative partners, I try to keep it to myself and a designer, or myself and a designer and the original stakeholder, and try not to let too many people into the process, because you're right. If it's writing or creating by committee, oftentimes that process becomes much longer than it needs to be, and the final product probably won't be as tight as it could have been with just a few brains working on it.
There's a very similar question that comes next from Anonymous. So I'm gonna move past that one in the interest of allowing lots of different topics to be covered. And the next one is from Noman, who says, I have this obsession with making things perfect or good. Because of this, I've procrastinated on putting out content. So, and actually gives further context. It says it's easy for me to publish as a ghostwriter, but not through my name. As much as that's a comment, I think there is a question there, which is, how do you avoid perfection? Is it the time thing that you spoke about in the presentation, or is it something else?
Yes, sir. Yeah. I mean, I can edit one of these articles until I die, like I could just keep on going. So like, it's a really, really healthy thing to do, to give yourself a deadline, self-imposed, and say, I'm going to publish this, share it, what have you, on this date at this time. And, wherever it is, that's where it is, do what you have to do to make it as good as you can. But that, it's just a matter of managing your deadlines and being honest with yourself. Because it's so healthy to just put stuff out there. It's so healthy to like have a deadline, stick to it, and move on to something else and create something new. Your work isn't going to be like, it's not going to be Da Vinci, it's not going to be perfect. But I think the value in moving on to something new and creating something else kind of overrules that perfection that you might get on that one project.
Do you ever, out of interest, and it needs to be a sentence, but do you ever go back and re-edit stuff? Do you ever go back and change it, or do you sort of put it out in the world and then?
Well, it's more so for marketing and growth purposes, right? Like I've written a lot of articles, but then I'll go back and I'll look at what I published 3 or 4 years ago, and I'll just cringe, and I'll be like, well, I can make this better, and then I'll rewrite it with with the benefit of everything that I know now, and the growth that I've had over those years as a writer and as a marketer. So I'll go back and I'll remake things, but yeah, I think that's very different than going back, or than sticking to something for longer than you need to.
Yeah, love that. So there's a lovely question here from Anita. So Anita asks, you mentioned that when you started out, you knew nothing about copywriting. At what point in your journey did you start to see yourself as a copywriter?
Oh, that is nice.
That's a hard one.
Yeah.
Well, it might be a hard one. I don't know, but it'll be.
Well, I'll tell you this. I mean, I immediately started to call myself a copywriter and tell people that I was a copywriter. I didn't really know as I certainly didn't know as much as I know now, or you know, have that experience. But you know, I wanted to, you know, that I had a goal, and that's what I wanted to be, and so, you know, I saw myself as a copywriter from the get-go. I guess when did I technically like feel like I could like I was a copywriter? I mean, you know, it was very validating to get hired as you know, to do that job and have that title and everything. But I mean, to this day, I feel like there's so much more that I can learn, so much better than I can get. I mean, I look at like people that I really look up to, and you know, they've just, you know, they're infinitely better. So there's a lot of room to grow for me. But I think you know, in the beginning, just don't doubt yourself and say, hey, this is who I am, and I'm doing my best to learn. And, you know, give yourself that confidence, and, you know, you will become it eventually.
No, spot on. I think that to relate to your answer, I think, you know, whether there was ever a point where I would personally consider myself a marketer, you know, or an accomplished marketer, or a good marketer, or whatever it may be. I don't know whether that point has ever come. You know, I think there's just a moment where, well, not even a moment, you've got the job title, and you do your best in it. You know, and I think it's interesting there that you started off calling yourself a copywriter, but then actually, as your answer progressed, you sort of spoke about like feeling like a copywriter, and I do think they're distinct things. So you know, that's a great answer there, Eddie. And also, I just want to say thank you for opening your talk in such a vulnerable and open place as well. I really appreciated that, and I know that the audience did too. I wanted to make sure that was included there. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so I think we'll take this question from Holly, and that may well be it. So Holly asks, do you have any tips on how to avoid proofing fatigue when going through multiple iterations of your copy, or indeed longer copy? You know, what's your method?
Yeah, I guess like when you just your eyes start to glaze over, you just read the same thing over and over again. I mean, I get, you know, kind of a simplistic answer to this, but you gotta step away from it. You gotta take some time away from the draft. You know, I wish there was something, you know, more complex or magical, but really there's nothing like stepping away, giving yourself a break, occupying your mind with something else. And then again, you know, you'll come back to it, and the mistakes or the issues will kind of pop out at you because, you know, you've been studying it for so long. You know, you come back to it, your brain has been incubating and thinking about the words in the background. So, you know, wish there was something more I could say, but you just got to step away from it and come back to it.
I think that's spot on, and actually that speaks to something which we're seeing in the chat feature here as well, which is there's a comment come through sort of saying, I came into the session feeling quite anxious and overwhelmed, and this has been a massive breath of fresh air. And like, but you know, these sessions, you know, that says everything about you, Eddie, but it also says everyone who's taken the time to attend today, because they've taken an hour, hopefully, to focus on today's session, get away from the laptop, well, in a form, get away from the work, and then sort of give time to invest in themselves, their learning, or sort of be processing things in the background. That's where those connections are made. So, you know, spot on.
And let me just say, man, I appreciate all you guys coming out and you know, taking an hour with us. I mean, it's really an honor. So, you know, I don't take it for granted at all, and I just appreciate you all. And Joe, I appreciate you having me on again, man. It's you know, they said they were anxious when they came on. I was a little anxious when I came on, but you always have a way of you know, making people feel comfortable. So I appreciate you.
Thank you, mate. You know, I really appreciate that, and you're getting so much love right now in the chat feature. So as Nicholas says, actually, please thank Eddie for the very good copy emails. Please go and get his emails. If you're not subscribed already, then make sure you are, because they are just so lovely and so inspirational. Absolutely smash it. Eddie, that is our time, and thank you also to everyone for chatting. Honestly, what an amazing session, and like the comments coming through are just so lovely. So we really appreciate it. There's a couple of questions about the rewatch. We'll publish a write-up and on in the next couple of days. It also goes on the Marketing Meetup podcast, and it's also on our YouTube as well. Please do take the time to thank Dominic from Brand Recruitment, and likewise, thank our other sponsors. Without them, we wouldn't be able to bring these sessions to you. So please do take the time. I'm speaking for as long as possible to give Eddie as much opportunity to digest these chat feature messages, praising him as possible. So a big thank you to everyone who's been watching today, taking part. Thank you to Eddie, and we'll see you very soon. Take care.